about way cash crisis works. Talking about Venezuela once again. Systemic important banks. They removed the 1,000 thing called monetary awareness.
Next recession.
Recession will be
A recession.
We're going to hit a recession.
The date of the next recession.
A U.S.-only recession typically lasts 8 to 10 months, but a lot of things about this particular one have not been typical. So
a crash is coming. Now, whether it's 6 months from now, 12 months, 36 months, no one knows.
I go to bed every night, I dream of another recession. If you know what to do, if you have the right plan to set up, you can make a lot of money from this.
Hey there, hope all is well. Back at you today with some more RT News updates. And as you can tell from today's title, we're going to be talking about the recession. And so I have a couple articles dealing with some of the events that could occur during the next recession. And it has to do with this vicious cycle over my shoulder here, with the very top one being job loss. And so I want to share with you an interview from a gentleman in Asheville, North Carolina, that was under the impression that his prior employment was going to be his last prior to retiring. And due to the Great Recession that occurred, it kind of changed his plans as well as his future outlook. And so I want to share that interview with you right now.
Up to that time, 29 years in my career being in transportation management. And I was convinced when I took this job, it would be the last job I ever had. They loved me and I loved them. It was a great company. And, you know, it was devastating because, you know, I wasn't a young man at that time. You know, I was like 61, 60, something like that, 59. I don't really remember exactly, but the prospect of being a senior citizen, almost going out and hitting the bricks again, you know, was not one that I wanted to pursue. It was traumatizing. I did not view it as my fault, but I didn't blame the company either. It was a purely economic decision. I didn't want to go home and tell my wife, but I did. You know, you have to. I just went home, and I told my wife, and she started crying, and I immediately applied for unemployment and got the newspaper and started looking for jobs.
That video there is a very unfortunate situation where a gentleman was caught blindsided by the whole Great Recession that happened 10 years ago. And so his plans were altered dramatically when he thought that that current role he was at was going to be his last, not knowing that because of the economic downturn, there would be layoffs and things like that, and he would have to get back out in the workforce, continue to look for work and whatnot. So I'm not sure if he's working now, but I thought I would share that video with you to give you an idea of what it's like for those that are in the retirement phase now that will be caught off guard when the next recession comes, as some of the articles will point at, as well as a lot of economists are talking about as well. But before I dive into that, as always, if you're new to RTD, I want to encourage you to click the subscribe button for more RT News updates as well as live talks. And if you're new to RTD, I want to encourage you to visit the RTD University page, where I put together all my prior interviews dealing with monetary and fiscal matters and the importance of having sound money in your hands today. So without further ado, let's dive into today's articles. So as I mentioned, I have 4 articles all dealing with the subject matter of a recession. And as always, I wanted to scan through the surface, give you something to think about, and at the very end, share my thoughts on the matter and how that all relates to the things we should be paying attention to in the days ahead. But more importantly, I want to encourage you to scroll down below to read more in depth for yourselves to get a better understanding of what's going on. And then also, if you find this to be informative, I want to encourage you to share this with your family and friends so that they can become more aware on these matters and not be caught off guard, such as the gentleman was down in Asheville, North Carolina. So without further ado, let's dive into today's articles. First one here is from The Week. It's called "The Next Recession Could Be a Doozy." Next one here is from the Citizens Times down in Asheville, North Carolina. And this is the article from the video I just shared with you guys. But it says, at 10-year mark since Great Recession began, memories of hardship linger down in North Carolina. And so it's quite a lengthy article, but very detailed on how the economy down there is still recovering and whatnot. Next one here is from See Beyond, and it says, is this how the next global recession begins? And this one right here is a very, very interesting one. Next one. And the last one is from Huffington Post. It says the next recession is really going to suck, and it has to do with the unemployment insurance and how a lot of the states haven't fully recovered from the prior Great Recession, and the impact it had on their books. So something definitely worth considering. Back to the very first one. So what I want to do basically is just thumb through it. I highlight a couple things, but more importantly, if you're interested in finding out more, I encourage you to read for yourself. So just to scroll through what's going on here, it gives a good timeline of the recent events that led up to the Great Recession. And then it talks about how a recent interview, some of the thoughts from former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers on how the ammunition for the recovery from the Great Recession has kind of been utilized up to the max. And so he himself is not quite sure on how the Fed and the government are going to get out of the next mess that's coming. And give you an idea what's going on here, it says in the next few years, a recession will come, and we will, in a sense, have already shot the monetary and fiscal policy cannon, said Larry Summers. It says now the economic profession doesn't have an exact definition for when recessions begin and end, but most everyone puts the length of the Great Recession at about 18 months. It says at the core of Summers' worry is the Federal Reserve's leeway to adjust interest rates. The central bank hikes rates to slow inflation, and it cuts them to boost job creation and fight off recessions. It says for every recession, there is theoretically some drop in interest rates big enough to counteract it, says Summers. It says interest rates were at 5.25 going into 2008, but the Great Recession was so bad that even cutting them all the way to zero wasn't enough to adequately stimulate the economy. It says, and it gets worse. There's something called the natural rate of interest. It's the sweet spot, the interest rate that maximizes employment without sparking continuously rising inflation. It says no one knows exactly where it is. Policymakers have to estimate from their own data. But all the evidence tells us the natural rate of interest has steadily fallen in recent decades. It says the economic mainstream isn't sure why it's happening, but the left wing of the profession has pretty strong case that realizing inequality is a major culprit. So the idea that there's more people on a very short end getting rich and there's the majority that's becoming poor, I'm sure is playing into that. Hey there, just want to take a quick minute to interrupt this video to remind you to visit the rethinkingthedollar.com website, where you get a chance to see all of my postings as well as educational resources, and as well as visit the RTD store where I have some free material for you as well as some t-shirts. And if you're interested in being more of a blessing to Rethinking the Dollar, I want to encourage you to visit the RTD donation page where I have a couple links there for you to contribute to this alternative media work. Other than that, let's get back to the show. Next one here is from Citizens Times down in Asheville, North Carolina. It gives a summary of what's happening down in Asheville, North Carolina, and how since the last Great Recession, a lot of things have changed and they're still recovering. So it gives a lot of testimonials on how people were caught off guard by the recession and the amount of jobs that were lost. And one thing that really stood out to me in this article here is the idea that an economist decided to share his thoughts as to why he believed there was a recession that came out of nowhere. And so it says here, it says economist James Smith doesn't fancy the phrase Great Recession. And it says reflecting on it. Reflecting on it, Smith blames two people in particular for the conditions that led to the recession. He says Bill Clinton and George W. Bush. Said he points to the two administrations' desire to expand home ownership, and particularly home ownership among lower income residents, that led to lenders pushing subprime loans or loans offered to those who do not traditionally qualify for standard home loans because of low credit scores or other factors. It says it is estimated that as many as 50% of the homes purchased from 2000 to 2006 were made by people who did not meet traditional lending requirements. So here you have the economist sharing his thoughts on how the whole idea of the two administrations prior to Obama was the reason for the whole housing subprime mortgage crisis, and the idea that they were telling people that everyone deserves a home at all costs, even if it means giving people houses that are not qualified for them. So that's coming straight from an economist down there in North Carolina. So more interesting information there if you're interested in reading more. The article here says, is this how the next global recession begins? So here we're talking about global. And so just to get an idea what's going on here, this is another lengthy article, but it talks about how the whole idea of was China having their problems internally, and most recently with the changing of how their presidential system operates there, they removed the limitations on terms for president. So it's saying that here that Xi will be president for the foreseeable future. And along with that comes the idea that they have their 5-year to 10-year plan, of which it includes the idea of the whole One Belt, One Road initiative, really spurring economic growth from inside China out. And so it talks about here that in the next year or two, they're going to have to, as it says here, take their foot off the gas pedal in 2018, 2019, which will result in a global recession. So once the Chinese stop pumping funny money into their system and basically allow things to correct, I mean, the yuan is going to strengthen, and then all the problems that they're experiencing will become somewhat of someone else's problem to deal with. And then it talks about here how the whole One Belt, One Road, the whole yuan, when it strengthens, will be a problem for the Federal Reserve, the United States, to deal with, because it will put pressure on stock markets here. And then there will be some type of global financial crisis from the U.S. business activity slowing down and whatnot. So it's very detailed if you're interested in finding out more, but yet it kind of points the fact that once China decides to back off their gas pedal a little bit, it's going to put pressure on the Eastern Hemisphere to begin really pumping money into the markets even more, which will lead to a recession that will be something considered a global recession. So more information there if you're interested in finding out for yourself, but it's very detailed. The next one here is from the Huffington Post, and says the next recession is really going to suck. And so this is another lengthy article that deals with the idea that once the Great Recession hit, one of the main problems that most people suffer from was the amount of job lost in the economy, and the response with the unemployment insurance, and how that kind of altered a lot of policy and whatnot. And so since that time, a lot of states have been struggling with recovering from that. And so they've had a lot of policies implemented to either extend or to withdraw some of the time frame that you can receive unemployment. And so it talks about the very bottom of this article here how there have been a lot of states that have made things even more complicated, to where if someone was to lose their job in this recession, it'll be a lot more complicated to actually be able to go through the process of filing an application online and whatnot to actually receive some form of insurance. And then the length of time that they would be needing that type of help would be a problem as well. So it basically states that when a next recession does hit, the system isn't ready for the amount of unemployment that will happen, and therefore the uninsurance aspect will be a problem, because the states are no longer in position to be able to refund it themselves, so they're going to need help from the government. And so that plays right into the idea that from this type of events happening here, if there's no pot to withdraw funds from to give people insurance as they look for another employment, there's going to be problems at the federal level, where governments are going to need to issue, as I mentioned before, a universal basic income to kind of hold off the idea of a Great Depression happening if more and more people lose jobs and aren't able to find some type of help. And if there's no real hiring going on, then it's going to be an extended period of time where people will be needing insurance supplementation, and that won't be available. So it will lead into more disastrous outcomes in the future. But that kind of wraps up what's happening in the news there. So the idea that there's a lot of talk of recession still on the main radars, and so everyone's chiming in, sharing their thoughts, but yet everyone can pinpoint the idea that a recession is coming. And as always, when a recession does come, it equals massive unemployment, and with unemployment comes people not able to pay their bills. So it's going to be a trickling effect of just a continuous economic decline, and the idea that this unemployment insurance may not be available to everyone when it's needed will be a major problem. So there'll be more people that's either unemployed right now or in retirement age really suffering from the idea that there's no real way of handling this next recession when it comes into play, because a lot of people feel it will be something that will make the Great Depression or the Great Recession look very small in comparison to the side effects of what's coming in the days ahead. So other than that, hope all is well. I wanted to share this information with you guys. Let me know your comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts. And other than that, if you find this informative, please share this with family and friends so they can find out what's happening and what they should expect come the next market downturn when the recession is fully here and more people are suffering from it. And other than that, hope all is well. See you guys later.